The day I received the court papers, I thought I was going to faint. My ex-husband David, the man who had callously abandoned us years ago, leaving a gaping wound in our small family, was suing me for sole custody of our precious son, Noah. I couldn't believe the audacity, the sheer unmitigated gall of it. He had barely been a whisper in Noah's life, a phantom father who materialized for fleeting moments only when it suited his own selfish agenda. And now, after all these years of neglect and indifference, he was trying to rip him away from me, the only constant loving presence Noah had ever known. But as the initial shockwave receded, a cold, hard resolve settled in its place. I wasn't scared. Not anymore. I knew exactly what kind of man David Carter was. I knew the carefully constructed facade he presented to the world, and I knew the darkness that lurked beneath. And I knew his secrets. Oh, the secrets I held. Secrets that, if revealed, could shatter his carefully polished image, ruin his reputation, and expose him for the fraud he truly was. Secrets he desperately, pathologically didn't want anyone to know, least of all a discerning family court judge. For years I had kept quiet, for Noah's sake. I had swallowed my pain, my anger, my disillusionment, all to protect my son from the devastating truth of his father's character, from the agony of knowing he wasn't truly loved or wanted by the man who shared his blood. But this time, this unprovoked, malicious attack on my motherhood, on Noah's stability, was a declaration of war. I wasn't going to stay silent any longer. I was going to fight back, and I was going to use David's own sordid secrets piece by damning piece to ensure Noah stayed with me in the loving, secure home where he belonged. It was a quiet, deceptively normal Tuesday afternoon when the official-looking envelope arrived, shattering the fragile peace of my day. I'd just finished putting away the last of the lunch dishes, the scent of lemon polish still lingering in the air from my morning cleaning spree, when the mailman, a cheerful man named Tom, who usually had a smile for me, knocked at the door. His face was impassive this time, betraying nothing as he handed me the small stack of letters, a routine transaction that was about to detonate my world. As soon as I saw the crisp, formal envelope from the county family court, my stomach lurched, a cold dread seeping into my bones. It felt heavy in my hand, weighted with an unspoken menace like a dark cloud suddenly obscuring the sun. I remember sinking onto the worn chintz armchair in the living room, my hands trembling so violently I could barely tear open the thick paper. The typed words, stark and black against the white page, seemed to jump out at me, blurring together at first, a meaningless jumble of legalistic jargon, until they finally horrifically coalesced into a coherent, devastating message. David Carter, my ex-husband, was formally petitioning the court for sole physical and legal custody of our 10-year-old son Noah Carter. My mind went utterly blank. For a long, terrifying moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I just stared at the printed words, my heart pounding in my chest like a trapped bird, each beat echoing the disbelief and a rising tide of pure, unadulterated rage. David. After all this time, the man who had walked out on us with barely a backward glance when Noah was just a bewildered, chubby-cheeked toddler of 3, his small hand still waving goodbye to a father who wouldn't return. The man who had consistently, callously refused to support us emotionally or financially beyond the bare minimum legally mandated child support which he often paid late and begrudgingly. He wanted to take my son, my entire world, away from me. I wanted to scream until my lungs burned. I wanted to crumble into a million pieces on the floor. But I couldn't. Not yet. There was no time for weakness. Noah, my son, my reason for breathing. He had been the singular focus of my life for the past 10 challenging, rewarding years. I had raised him on my own, juggling a full-time job as a librarian with the endless demands of single parenthood. I had poured every ounce of my being, every sacrifice, every prayer into ensuring he felt loved, secure, and happy. And now, David, the man who hadn't even bothered to show up for most of Noah's school plays, his Little League games, his birthdays, the man whose presence in Noah's life was more akin to a distant, unreliable relative than a father, was trying to usurp my role to steal him away. No. 1,000 times no. I wasn't going to let that happen. Not without the fight of my life. I didn't tell Noah immediately. He was at school, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering over our lives. I needed time to process this insane, unprovoked assault, to formulate a plan to understand what fresh hell David was intent on unleashing. But as soon as I could compose myself enough to speak without my voice breaking, I called my lawyer, Laura Hayes. She was more than just my lawyer. She was a friend, a sharp, no-nonsense advocate who had navigated me through the initial messy divorce from David with compassion and steely competence. She was the one person I trusted implicitly to help me navigate this new, terrifying legal labyrinth. "Laura, it's Sarah," I said. My voice tight, strained, barely recognizable even to my own ears. "You need to come to my house. Now. It's David." Within the hour, Laura's familiar, sensible sedan was pulling into my driveway. She was, as always, a picture of calm professionalism, but even her composed demeanor couldn't entirely hide the flicker of concern in her intelligent eyes when I handed her the court papers and recounted the unbelievable demand. "This is unexpected, Sarah," she said carefully, settling onto my kitchen table, her gaze scanning the documents with a lawyer's practiced speed. "Extremely unexpected. David hasn't shown any genuine interest in Noah's day-to-day life for years. There's been no change in circumstances that would warrant such a drastic petition. Why is he doing this now? What's his angle?" "I don't know, Laura," I said, my mind racing through 1,001 nightmarish possibilities. "He doesn't give a reason in these papers, just the standard best interests of the child boilerplate. But I know one thing for damn sure: he's not getting my son. Over my dead body." Laura nodded, her expression hardening with a resolve that mirrored my own. "We're going to fight this, Sarah. Tooth and nail. Of course we are, but we need to be brutally prepared. You know David. He'll fight dirty. He'll try to paint you as an unfit mother, dredge up anything he can, twist any innocent situation. We're going to need more than just your word against his this time. We need irrefutable proof that Noah's best interests lie unequivocally with you, and perhaps proof that David is categorically not a suitable custodial parent." The next few days were an agonizing blur of fear, anger, and sleepless nights. I tried to maintain a facade of normalcy for Noah's sake, but the weight of David's impending attack, the sheer injustice of it, hung over me like a suffocating shroud. Noah, perceptive as ever, knew something was wrong. He didn't know the specifics, and I wasn't ready to burden his young shoulders with the ugly truth just yet. He was only 10, a sensitive, thoughtful boy. I didn't want him to carry this anxiety, this fear of being torn from his home before he absolutely had to. But I knew with a sinking heart that sooner or later he would have to hear it. He would have to be prepared. That evening, after a mostly silent dinner where I pushed food around my plate and Noah picked at his, I sat him down on the living room couch. He was curled up with a fantasy novel, his current escape, but his eyes kept flicking up to me, sensing the gravity of the unspoken. "Hey, buddy," I began, my voice softer than I intended, trying to project a calm I was far from feeling. I sat next to him, close enough to offer comfort, but not so close as to crowd him. "There's something important we need to talk about. Something about Dad." His face, usually so open and bright, tensed almost imperceptibly, but I could see the familiar flicker of hope mixed with apprehension in his eyes. "What's wrong, Mom?" "You look really serious. Is Dad okay?" I sighed, a long, slow exhalation, trying to steady my own racing pulse. "You know how your dad, well, how he hasn't been around very much for a long time." Noah nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the book in his lap. "Yeah, but I've been thinking about him a lot lately. Why hasn't he called or visited Mom? Did I do something wrong?" The innocent question, laced with a child's unearned guilt, was like another twist of the knife in my heart. I reached for his small hand, my fingers closing over his. "No, sweetie. Oh, no, you haven't done anything wrong at all. Ever. This is not about you. Well, your dad. He's decided he wants to try and be more involved in your life now. A lot more involved. He's going to court to try and get custody of you." Noah's face went pale, his mouth falling open in confusion. "Custody? What does that mean? Is he going to come and live with us again?" There was a strange mixture of fear and a deeply buried, almost forgotten hope in his voice. "No, honey," I said quickly, perhaps too quickly, needing to quash that particular painful hope. "No, he's not going to live with us. It means that he's asking the judge to let you live with him instead of me. He wants you to leave our home and go and live with him. He wants to be the parent who takes care of you all the time." I paused, seeing the sheer terror and disbelief flood his young face. "But listen to me, Noah. That is not going to happen. You don't have to worry about that for a second. You will always have your home here with me. I will make absolutely sure of that." I could see the storm of emotions warring in his eyes: fear, confusion, a touch of bewildered anger. He wasn't sure what to make of this sudden, incomprehensible upheaval. "What do you mean, Mom? Why is he doing this now? After all this time, I don't even really know him. He's like a stranger." I swallowed hard, my throat tightening against the lump of unshed tears. "I know, sweetie. I know it's confusing and scary, and I don't have all the answers as to why he's doing this now. But we're going to be okay. We're a team. Remember, you and me against the world, and I won't let him take you from me. I promise." The next few weeks were a relentless barrage of legal meetings, frantic phone calls, and the soul-crushing perusal of endless legal jargon. Laura was a rock, meticulously preparing our defense, anticipating David's likely tactics. But I knew it wouldn't be an easy fight. David had money resources he'd never shared with us. He had influence in certain circles. And he possessed a chillingly effective way of manipulating situations, of twisting facts, of charming people into believing his carefully constructed narratives, making himself look like the reasonable party, the victim even. But what David didn't know, what he clearly didn't realize in his monumental arrogance, was that I knew him better than anyone else on this earth. I knew the real David, the one hidden behind the suave smile and the expensive suits. I knew the secrets he had so carefully, so desperately tried to bury. I knew the skeletons rattling in his designer closets, and I wasn't going to let him use our son as a pawn in his sick game to cover up his past or to exact some twisted revenge on me. This time, the secrets were coming out. As Laura and I prepared for the looming court battle, a battle I knew would be ugly and deeply personal, I started to delve back into the murky waters of David's past, our past together. It wasn't a task I relished. Revisiting those years was like picking at old festering wounds. But I wasn't just looking for emotional ammunition. I was searching for concrete, undeniable facts, for anything that would expose the true nature of the man who now claimed he wanted to be a full-time father. I wasn't entirely sure what I would find, or if anything from so long ago would even be relevant in court. But I knew David. He had always been the consummate charmer, a chameleon adept at presenting whatever face the situation required. He was a master at pretending to be someone he wasn't. But I, his ex-wife, the woman who had once loved him and then been so thoroughly betrayed by him, I knew the truth. And I was beginning to realize that the truth, however painful, held the power to protect my son. My first port of call was the attic, that dusty repository of forgotten memories and painful relics. I unearthed old boxes filled with letters, bank statements from our marriage, forgotten photographs, and even a few old journals I'd kept during the turbulent final years of our relationship. As I sifted through the brittle pages, a clearer, darker picture of David began to reemerge, details I had perhaps subconsciously suppressed. The frequent unexplained absences, the secretive phone calls late at night, the sudden extravagant purchases he couldn't quite account for, followed by periods of inexplicable financial strain. The subtle, insidious ways he had undermined my confidence, his use of what I now recognized as classic gaslighting techniques, a form of mental and emotional violence that left invisible scars. I remembered the explosive arguments often triggered by my questioning his whereabouts or his spending. He'd twist my words, make me doubt my own sanity, paint me as jealous, insecure, controlling. He was a master manipulator. Then I started reaching out cautiously at first to a few old trusted friends, people who had known us as a couple, people who had perhaps seen things I hadn't or hadn't wanted to see at the time. One old friend, Maria, who had been my confidant during the worst of the marital breakdown, reminded me of David's gambling problem, something he had always vehemently denied, but which Maria had witnessed firsthand on a disastrous group vacation years ago. He'd lost a significant amount of money that was supposed to be for a down payment on a family car, and then lied to me about it, blaming a bad investment. Another acquaintance, a former colleague of David's whom I tracked down through social media, reluctantly shared stories of David's workplace behavior, his penchant for bending rules for taking undue credit for others' work, and whispers of inappropriate relationships with junior staff members. Nothing concrete enough for a lawsuit, perhaps, but it painted a consistent picture of a man with a flawed moral compass. The evidence was beginning to accumulate piece by painful piece. Secrets about his deceit, his infidelity, which I now suspected was far more extensive than the one affair I had uncovered before our divorce, and his significant hidden debts began to surface. It turned out his successful business ventures after he left us were largely a house of cards built on borrowed money and risky investments, many of which had failed spectacularly, leaving a trail of angry creditors. But the most significant breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Laura, my lawyer, suggested we hire a discreet private investigator, someone skilled in financial forensics and background checks. If David is making a play for sole custody, Sarah, she'd said, he's likely trying to present himself as a pillar of stability. We need to see if that image holds up under scrutiny. It didn't. The investigator, a meticulous and thorough man named Mr. Henderson, unearthed a veritable goldmine of damning information within a week. David, it turned out, hadn't just been financially irresponsible. He had a documented history of defaulting on loans of bounced checks and even a small settled-out-of-court lawsuit from a former business partner alleging fraud. His current thriving import-export business was teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, propped up by a recent suspiciously large influx of cash from an unknown source. And then there was the matter of his current personal life. He had presented himself to the court as a reformed man living a quiet, stable life. Mr. Henderson's surveillance proved otherwise. David was still a frequent visitor to high-stakes poker rooms, and his stable relationship with his new partner was anything but. There were documented instances of loud public arguments and even a call to the police for a domestic disturbance, though no charges were filed. But the biggest bombshell of all, the piece of information that made my blood run cold and simultaneously steeled my resolve, was the discovery of his ongoing hidden relationship with a woman from his distant past, a woman named Clarissa. She wasn't just a casual fling. She was someone he had been involved with intermittently, even while we were married, a long-term clandestine affair he had managed to keep completely hidden from me. And crucially, Clarissa had a documented history of substance abuse and instability. This was the woman who was now a significant, if secret, part of the life David proposed to bring Noah into. I had the ammunition I needed, more than enough. David had always thought he could hide behind his charm, his carefully constructed lies, his veneer of affluence. But now I was going to systematically dismantle that facade in front of a judge. I wasn't just going to expose him as a neglectful father. I was going to expose him as the deeply flawed, deceitful, and potentially dangerous man he truly was. This wasn't just about protecting Noah from being uprooted anymore. This was about protecting him from David himself. This was about ensuring justice was finally truly served. My first step in this counteroffensive was to ensure Noah felt heard, that his own voice would be a part of this process as much as a 10-year-old's could be. The fight was truly on. It was the day of the court hearing D-Day. The atmosphere in the sterile corridors of the family court building felt heavy, almost suffocating, thick with unspoken anxieties and the ghosts of countless fractured families. I had prepared for this moment for weeks, months, it felt like. I had relived painful memories, collected damning evidence, worked tirelessly with Laura, and mentally rehearsed my responses to David's inevitable attacks. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have truly prepared me for the sheer emotional weight of it. For the moment I would have to face him, the man who was once my husband, now my adversary, in that formal, intimidating courtroom. As I entered the courtroom, Laura by my side, a reassuring presence. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, the court staff, other lawyers, the few observers. I stood tall, or at least I tried to, holding my head as high as I could manage, despite the maelstrom of emotions, anger, fear, sorrow, but above all, a mother's fierce, unwavering determination swirling inside me. I wasn't just there for myself to defend my rights as a mother. I was there for Noah. I was there for every child who had ever been wronged, used as a pawn by a parent who thought they could manipulate the system and get away with it. David was already seated at the plaintiff's table with his slick, expensive-looking lawyer, a Mr. Thompson, whose reputation for aggressive, underhanded tactics preceded him. David, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, had his usual smug, confident expression plastered on his face, an expression I knew so well, one designed to project power and belittle his opponents. He glanced at me briefly, a fleeting, dismissive look, but there was no warmth. No flicker of shared history or parental concern in his cold gaze. There never had been, not really. He had always been about appearances, about maintaining control, about winning at all costs. And he clearly thought he could control this situation, this courtroom, this judge in the same way he'd always tried to control me. But I wasn't that frightened, easily manipulated young woman anymore. I wasn't going to let that happen. The judge, a stern but fair-looking woman named Judge Harrison, called the session to order, her gavel falling with a sharp, decisive crack that seemed to echo the tension in the room. The proceedings began. David's lawyer, Mr. Thompson, launched into his opening statement with a theatrical flourish, attempting to paint me as an unstable, overwhelmed, and ultimately unfit mother. He portrayed David as the concerned, capable father, now ready and eager to provide the superior, more financially secure environment Noah supposedly deserved. He twisted facts, exaggerated minor incidents from years ago, and generally used every trick in the legal playbook to question my finances, my living situation, even my parenting choices and my emotional stability. It was a vile, calculated character assassination. But I didn't flinch. I sat there, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking, my gaze fixed on Judge Harrison, praying she could see through the charade. I had the truth on my side, and when it was finally my turn, when Laura gave me a reassuring nod, I stood up, my voice surprisingly steady, clear, and resonant in the quiet courtroom. Your Honor, I began addressing the judge directly. I never asked for this. I never wanted to be here to have my life, my motherhood picked apart and judged in this public forum. All I have ever wanted since the day my son was born is to give Noah the best, most loving, most stable life I possibly could. I have spent every waking moment for the past 10 years fighting for him, for his happiness, for his safety, for his well-being, often with little or no support from Mr. Carter. What my ex-husband is doing here today, Your Honor, is not about Noah's best interests. It is about his ego. It is about his desire for control. It is perhaps about some misguided attempt to alleviate his own guilt for years of neglect. But it is not about love, and it is not about fatherhood. And I cannot let him take my son. Judge Harrison nodded slowly, her intelligent eyes meeting mine as I spoke. There was a calm, thoughtful authority in the way she held herself, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of hope, a sense that I was being truly heard, that justice might actually prevail. David's lawyer, Mr. Thompson, clearly didn't take kindly to my words or to the judge's attentive demeanor. He immediately launched into a brutal cross-examination, attempting to discredit me further, to rattle me, to bring up incidents from my past, twisting them to paint me as emotionally volatile, financially irresponsible, someone who had made mistakes, someone who wasn't good enough for Noah. He was relentless, his questions like a barrage of poisoned darts. But that's when Laura, calm and collected, signaled that it was time. That's when I dropped the bombshells we had so carefully prepared. I stood up again, my voice clear and confident, no trace of a tremor now. Your Honor, with the court's permission, my counsel would like to present some evidence that will show unequivocally who my ex-husband David Carter really is. evidence that will prove the extraordinary lengths he has gone to the complex web of lies he has spun not just to this court, but throughout his life, and the profound, lasting damage he has caused to others, including his own son, by his neglect. I watched with a grim sort of satisfaction as David's face turned a sickly shade of pale. His eyes, moments before, so arrogant, widened with a dawning panic. He shifted uncomfortably in his expensive leather chair. He shot a desperate, furious look at his lawyer. He wasn't expecting this. He had clearly, foolishly underestimated me. He never expected me to fight back with cold, hard, irrefutable truth. Laura then systematically, professionally began to present the evidence. The first document was a meticulously compiled series of emails and explicit text messages between David and his long-term mistress, Clarissa, messages that not only confirmed his infidelity throughout our marriage, but also revealed his callous disregard for my feelings and his manipulative discussions about how to keep me in the dark. The dates on these messages were damning. Next came the financial records obtained through Mr. Henderson's investigation. Bank statements, loan documents, and sworn affidavits showing how David had systematically hidden assets during our divorce proceedings, money that should have been declared money that should have been allocated for Noah's upbringing and future care. It painted a picture of calculated financial deceit. Then Laura presented evidence of David's ongoing gambling addiction. Casino markers, online betting account statements, even a discreetly obtained video snippet from Mr. Henderson showing David at a high-stakes poker game just the previous week, looking disheveled and desperate. This directly contradicted his sworn affidavit to the court, claiming he lived a quiet, responsible lifestyle. And the final, most devastating piece of evidence was a series of documents including police reports for the domestic disturbance and a sworn statement from a former, now recovering associate of Clarissa, detailing Clarissa's ongoing struggles with substance abuse and her volatile, unstable living situation, the very environment David proposed to bring Noah into should he gain custody. It also included details of David's own precarious financial situation, the near bankruptcy of his company, and his trail of unpaid debts. The silence in the courtroom was deafening, broken only by the rustle of papers as Judge Harrison carefully examined each piece of evidence. David's lawyer, Mr. Thompson, tried to interject to object to downplay the evidence, but it was too late. His bluster deflated. The judge had already seen the undeniable truth. David's smug smile had completely vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. He knew in that moment that he was losing control, that his carefully constructed world of lies was collapsing around him. "Mr. Carter," Judge Harrison finally said, her voice stern, her gaze unwavering as she looked directly at David. "This court finds this evidence deeply troubling. Extremely troubling. Your petition for sole custody was predicated on your assertion that you could provide a more stable and beneficial environment for your son than his mother. This evidence strongly suggests otherwise. In fact, it suggests a pattern of deceit, irresponsibility, and a lifestyle that could be actively detrimental to a child. Mr. Carter, I want you to address these findings. This court will take these new, serious revelations into very careful consideration when making its ruling." David's lawyer tried to salvage the situation, to offer explanations, to request a recess, but there was no point. The truth in all its ugly detail was out. The lies had been methodically, irrefutably exposed. David, for once in his life, was speechless, his face a mask of dawning horror and defeat. The rest of the hearing felt almost like a formality, though it stretched on for another hour as Laura expertly reinforced our position and Mr. Thompson feebly attempted damage control. It felt like time was moving in slow motion as Judge Harrison deliberated, but deep in my heart I knew the verdict was inevitable. I had fought for my son with truth and evidence, and the truth had prevailed. I had won. My son was staying with me where he was loved, safe, and truly belonged. When Judge Harrison finally spoke, her words were firm, unequivocal. In light of the substantial and credible evidence presented today, it is abundantly clear to this court that the current custodial arrangement with the mother, Ms. Sarah Carter, having sole physical and legal custody, is firmly in the best interests of the child, Noah Carter. Mr. David Carter's request for a modification of custody is hereby denied. Furthermore, based on the evidence of financial deceit and ongoing instability, this court orders a review of Mr. Carter's current child support obligations and visitation rights with a strong recommendation for supervised visitation only pending a full psychological evaluation of Mr. Carter. I felt a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled my knees. The crushing weight I had been carrying for months, for years, really finally lifted from my shoulders. It wasn't just a victory for me as a mother, it was a victory for Noah. A victory for truth, a victory for every child who had ever been mistreated, neglected, or misunderstood by a parent who put their own selfish needs first. David looked at me, then his face a maelstrom of disbelief, rage, and dawning impotent fury. His hands were clenched into white-knuckled fists at his sides, but there was nothing he could do now. His secrets were out. His lies were exposed. He had lost. And he had lost spectacularly. The days and weeks following the court hearing were a whirlwind of emotions, a complex tapestry woven with relief exhaustion and a quiet, profound satisfaction. There was the undeniable elation of victory, the sweet taste of justice finally served. But beneath it, there was also the lingering sorrow for what Noah had been put through, for the ugliness he had been exposed to, even indirectly. I knew that knowing his father had tried to take him away, and then learning, even in carefully chosen age-appropriate terms, some of the reasons why that father was deemed unfit would leave its own invisible scars. David, true to his narcissistic form, didn't take the loss well. In the immediate aftermath, he tried to contact Noah multiple times, a sudden desperate flurry of messages tearful, and I suspected performative voicemails even showing up unannounced at our door one evening demanding to explain things to his son. But Noah, to my quiet surprise and immense pride, wasn't interested in any of it. He refused to take his calls, deleted his messages unread. And when David appeared at the door, Noah stood bravely behind me, his small face set, and simply said, "No thank you, Dad. I want to stay with Mom." Noah, in his own 10-year-old way, had processed the truth about his father, or at least the parts of it he could grasp. He had seen the man who claimed to care so deeply about him for what he really was, not just an absent father, but a liar, a cheat, and ultimately, a man who had tried to use him to disrupt his entire life for reasons that had nothing to do with genuine love or concern. The idealized image of the dad he barely knew, an image perhaps fueled by a child's natural longing, had been shattered by the harsh reality of David's actions in court. I sat down with Noah one quiet evening, a week or so after the hearing, after he'd once again refused to answer one of David's increasingly desperate calls. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I asked gently, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "It's okay if you're feeling confused or even sad about Dad." He looked up at me, his blue eyes so like his father's in color, but so different in their depth of feeling, filled with a surprising clarity. "I don't want to talk to him, Mom. Not right now. Maybe not ever. He tried to make you look bad. He tried to take me away from you. And the judge said he wasn't being honest. I don't want anything from him." And that was when I truly realized. My son, my brave, resilient boy, had already made his choice long before any judge had to. And I, by arming myself with the truth and fighting for him, had simply helped him validate that choice. Helped him see that his instincts about his father, perhaps a subconscious unease he'd carried for years, were not wrong. My role hadn't been to manipulate him against David, but to give him the unvarnished truth, the one thing David had always tried so desperately to hide, so that Noah could make his own informed, if painful, emotional decisions. As for David, his presence in our lives dwindled rapidly. He made a few more half-hearted, legally mandated attempts at supervised visitation, but they were awkward, strained affairs that Noah clearly endured rather than enjoyed. Eventually faced with a son who was polite but distant and a court system that was no longer susceptible to his charms, David simply disappeared again. He faded back into the shadows of his own complicated, self-destructive life. I never had to see him in court again. And Noah never again had to worry about being a pawn in the games of a man who never truly understood the meaning of fatherhood. The financial review ordered by the judge did result in a more appropriate child support order, one that David surprisingly began to pay, perhaps fearing further legal repercussions. But it was never about the money for me. It was about the principle. It was about Noah's security. In the end, this harrowing experience taught me something profound about myself, about my resilience, and about the fierce, indomitable nature of motherhood. No matter what life throws at you, no matter how powerful or intimidating the opposition seems, I would always, always fight for my son. I would always be his shield, his advocate, his unwavering protector, no matter the personal cost. And in the process of defending my child, I had not only protected him from a damaging situation, but I had also inadvertently taught him one of life's most valuable lessons, that the truth, however difficult or painful, is always more powerful than any lie, any deception. And that true strength isn't about avoiding conflict, but about facing it with courage, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to what is right. Noah had seen his mother fight and win not with aggression, but with facts and dignity. That I hoped was a legacy more valuable than any inheritance David could have ever offered. Our small family, once fractured by betrayal, was now stronger, more honest, and finally truly at peace. A mother's love is an unbreakable, unyielding force, and her resolve when her child is threatened is even stronger, more formidable than tempered steel. When we fight for our children, we don't just defend them from the dangers and injustices of the world. We model for them how to stand up for themselves, how to discern truth from falsehood, how to navigate life's inevitable challenges with courage and integrity. And in the end, that is perhaps the greatest, most enduring gift we can give them, the unshakable knowledge that they are loved unconditionally, the ability to see the truth clearly, and the inner strength to face it and whatever else life may bring head on.